27 minutes. 27 minutes and 27 seconds to be exact. That is not the length of a coffee break or a school class. That is how long the players of Spain and Argentina were forced to sit in a cold tunnel in the biggest football match on the planet, while the pitch above them was turned into a Madonna concert. 27 minutes and 27 seconds. Remember that number. Because that number is not a scheduling error. That number is a receipt. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly what was bought, who signed the check, and who paid the real price. This is not the story of Spain beating Argentina 1-0. This is the story of the night football itself was left waiting in the corridor. And the man holding the door shut was wearing a very expensive suit. Let me be blunt. The 2026 World Cup final did not end when Ferran Torres scored in the 106th minute of extra time. The final was already wounded before the second half even began. Because at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, on the 19th of July 2026, the governing body of world football broke its own rule book, on purpose, on live television, in front of billions of witnesses. And the reason was not sport. The reason was a stage. Here is the ground zero. Under the laws of the game, written by the International Football Association Board and enforced by FIFA itself, Law 7 is very simple. Players are entitled to a halftime interval, not exceeding 15 minutes. 15, not 16, not 20. 15. This law is not decoration. This law exists because decades of sports science research on halftime physiology have shown the same thing over and over. After 45 minutes of top-intensity football, an athlete's body enters a delicate zone. Sit too long, and core body temperature drops measurably. Sprint capacity falls, muscles stiffen, reaction times slow. Injuries in the calves and hamstrings spike in the opening minutes of the second half. That is not opinion. That is the reason the 15-minute cap was written into the sports law book in the first place. Not for tradition, for safety. Now hold that in your head. 15 minutes by law. And ask yourself one question. What number did we actually get on that Sunday in New Jersey? 27 minutes, 27 seconds. That is not a rounding error. That is nearly double the legal limit. FIFA had promised the world it would be 17 minutes, then 20 at most. FIFA missed its own target by more than 7 minutes. And the reason the players were still sitting in that tunnel was not a rain delay, not a medical emergency, not a security scare. The reason was a stage that had to be built, played on, and dragged off again. A stage where Coldplay opened, where Chris Martin curated the whole spectacle, where Madonna, Shakira, Justin Bieber, BTS, and Burna Boy took turns under the New Jersey sky. There were even Muppets. Yes, Muppets, at a World Cup final. The Ted Lasso cast waved from the sideline. Gustavo Dudamel conducted an orchestra. It was slick. It was surreal. It was, in the honest words of The Athletic, entirely unnecessary. So here's the thesis, plain and clean. FIFA did not accidentally overrun. FIFA sold the middle of a World Cup final to sponsors, to broadcasters, and to the American entertainment market. And when the choice came down to protecting the players or protecting the show, FIFA chose the show. Every single time. Look at the money that was moving in the background. This halftime show was not a gift to the fans. It was a product. Organizers openly said they wanted the most viewed halftime show in the history of television, aimed squarely at the American living room, positioned as a Super Bowl rival. That framing does not happen for free. That framing happens because sponsorship inventory, in-stadium advertising, and broadcast slots around an 11-minute performance are worth a fortune when you can guarantee a global audience of over 1 billion pairs of eyes. Multiply 11 minutes of premium airtime by that audience, and the numbers stop being football numbers. They become Hollywood numbers. And Hollywood does not care if a fullback pulls a hamstring in the 48th minute. Now let me show you the contradiction, because this is where FIFA's version of events falls apart. Publicly, FIFA said the interval would last, quote, no more than 17 minutes. That was the line. 17. Then 20. Executives briefed reporters that experts had been consulted, that player welfare was central, that the show would be tight and disciplined. That was the promise. Reality delivered 27 minutes and 27 seconds. Reality delivered players sitting on tunnel benches with towels over their heads, staring at the floor, while Chris Martin sang about love above them. Reality delivered a second half where Argentina looked heavy-legged, and Spain, the fresher, deeper squad, eventually killed them in extra time through a substitute. Reality delivered Wayne Rooney, live on BBC One, watching all of this and saying, quote, "I thought it was crap." 5 words from a former England captain on the world's most polite broadcaster. That is not a rant. That is a verdict. And this is the part FIFA does not want you to sit with. If Law 7 says 15 minutes and the show ate 27, then somebody, somewhere inside FIFA, signed off on breaking the sport's own written law. Not bent, broken, not by a rogue referee, by the governing body itself. Zoom out for a second because this is not the first crack in the wall. The Club World Cup last year already stretched a halftime past the 15-minute rule. Copa America tested the same trick. Each time, the argument was the same. Just this once. Just for the spectacle. Just for the American audience. And now, at the biggest single football match on earth, the exception has quietly become the rule. That is how norms die. Not with a bang. With a stage crew. Now let me stack the receipts, quickly, so nobody can hand-wave this away. 27 minutes and 27 seconds of halftime. Officially the longest halftime in World Cup history. 15 minutes is the legal cap under Law 7. Measurable drops in core body temperature after that long await, according to sports science. Declines in sprint performance after just 10 to 15 minutes of inactivity. A rise in the risk of hamstring, calf and thigh injuries in the opening minutes of the second half. A 1-0 Spanish win where the only goal did not arrive until the 106th minute of extra time from a substitute with fresh legs. And in the days after, Gianni Infantino publishing a roughly 900-word statement, hitting out at critics for, in his words, spreading hate. Nearly 1,000 words to defend a night in which the players themselves were treated as the opening act. Pile all of that up, and it stops looking like a mistake. It starts looking like a business model. Football on top, entertainment on the inside, sponsors at the door, and Law 7 in the bin. Now, in fairness, let me hand FIFA the microphone. Here is the honest counter-argument, and I will not pretend it does not exist. The World Cup final is a global cultural event, not only a match. Growing the game in the United States means competing with the NFL, the NBA, and the Super Bowl for attention. A halftime show can pull in millions of casual viewers who would never otherwise watch 90 minutes of football. Some of those viewers will become fans. Some of those fans will fund grassroots programs in future cycles. And it is true that no player suffered a career-ending injury on the night. It is true the final produced a memorable Spanish victory. If you squint, you can call this progress. You can argue that a small stretch on halftime is a fair trade for a bigger tent. That is the steel man. That is the strongest version of FIFA's case. I have said it out loud so you cannot accuse me of skipping it. But here's the problem with that argument. You do not need to break Law 7 to grow the game. You could put the concert before kickoff. You could put it after the final whistle. You could build a pre-match ceremony worthy of the Super Bowl and leave halftime alone. The choice to plant the show inside the match and then let it run 12 minutes over the legal limit was not necessity. It was preference. Somebody in a boardroom looked at a spreadsheet and decided the middle of the match was where the eyeballs were densest. So the middle of the match was where the money would sit. Everything else, the stiff muscles, the broken law, the tunnel, the towels, was collateral. And this is the part that should sting for any real fan. Football's whole selling point, the reason it beats every other sport on the planet, is that the game does not stop. No timeouts every 90 seconds. No commercial break every possession. 45 uninterrupted minutes, then 15 off, then 45 more. That. Rhythm is the sport. On the 19th of July 2026, on the biggest stage the sport has, FIFA broke that rhythm and handed it to a stage manager. That is not modernization. That is amputation. So where does this leave us? Spain lifted the trophy. Argentina left with regret and a heavy walk to the airport. Messi's final World Cup ended without a fairy tale. Ferran Torres wrote himself into history. Those are the sporting headlines. But the headline underneath the headline, the one FIFA hopes you will forget by the next international break, is this one. The custodians of the game broke the law of the game to sell the show around the game. And they got away with it. 2 questions for you before you go. First, if the governing body of a sport is willing to break its own written law on the biggest night of its own tournament, what exactly is stopping them from doing it again, and worse, in 2028 and 2030? Second, when you watch the next World Cup final and the halftime clock passes 15 minutes, then 20, then 25, whose interests do you believe are being served in that extra time? The players, the fans, or the invoice? Drop your answer in the comments. I read the honest ones and I ignore the noise. Subscribe if you want the next breakdown before the algorithm hides it. And remember the number, 27 minutes and 27 seconds. That was not halftime. That was the sound of football being put on hold so the cash register could sing.